I live alone in a modest little house on a sprawling piece of land just outside a mid-sized Cody town. It's remote, quiet, peaceful and tucked away, surrounded by endless acres of wild countryside and dense forests. Out here, isolation feels different, more intense. Even though owning land in Cody isn't as impossible as it is in many states, that solitude has its price. In spring 2019, I discovered just how steep that price could be. It had been raining for nearly a month straight, day after day of relentless storms that turned the earth into a sticky, muddy mess. The house would shudder under the thunder, windows rattling as lightning sliced through the sky. Living alone, I'd grown used to the quiet, but the silence was heavy under the rainy skies, the kind that settles over everything, making every small sound feel amplified. That Sunday evening, as rain drummed steadily on the roof, I settled down in the dimming grey light to binge watch some shows, content to let the world blur out. Just as dusk started slipping into full darkness, a soft, hesitant knock came at my door. The sound, muffled by the storm, was barely noticeable, but it made my heart skip. Out here, visitors are practically non-existent, especially in weather like this. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and unease, and opened the door. A man stood on the other side, soaked to the bone, water dripping from his dark hair and pooling at his feet. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, with a face shadowed by exhaustion or something darker. His clothes were muddy, clinging to his frame, but his backpack looked unusually clean. Something about him seemed off, like he didn't quite belong, standing there in the misty rain with a pleading look in his eyes. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound calm even as my pulse hammered in my ears. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze never quite meeting mine, and explained that he'd been camping in the nearby woods but had run into trouble with the unending rain. He needed somewhere to stay for the night. His story was plausible. My house was the nearest spot of civilization, a solitary light in miles of emptiness. Still, unease twisted in my stomach. There was something unsettling about him, about his wet, muddy clothes that didn't quite match his clean backpack or the nervous look in his eye. He looked desperate, almost too eager, and when I suggested he use my phone to call for a ride, he shook his head with an odd intensity. "Just need a roof for the night," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. His eyes, when they finally met mine, were cold like steel with a faint glimmer of something I couldn't place. A quiet rage, maybe? I forced a polite smile and firmly but carefully declined, insisting that I couldn't let anyone inside. He stared for a long moment, his eyes searching my face, and for a second I thought he might push past me. But then, with a curt nod, he turned and trailed off, trudging back down the muddy path. I watched as he vanished into the mist at the edge of the woods, the faint glow of my porch lights barely illuminating his retreating figure. Shaking off the encounter, I returned to my TV, but the feeling of dread lingered. The storm grew louder, the rain hammering against the roof in waves. Nearly 2 hours later, a flickering orange glow caught my eye from the window overlooking the backyard. Through the rain, I could just make out the faint shimmer of a campfire at the edge of my property. There, barely visible through the mist, was a figure standing motionless, silhouetted against the dim firelight. My heart pounded as I strained to see. Was it the same man? He was holding something, maybe a walking stick or a weapon. The firelight threw eerie shadows, making it impossible to be certain. I stumbled back from the window, my skin crawling. I was sure he was watching the house, watching me. I grabbed my phone, dialed the police, and explained that there was someone lurking on my property. The dispatcher promised they'd send someone, but I knew it would be a while before anyone arrived. I checked the window again, and this time the figure was gone. The campfire, however, continued to burn, flickering like a silent warning in the rain. Moments later, I heard soft, wet footsteps squelching through the mud. Panic surged as I realized they were getting closer. Frantic, I darted to another window and peeked out. just in time to catch a glimpse of a shadow moving along the side of the house. My heart raced as I saw the glint of metal. He was holding a rifle. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. What did he want? Did he know I was alone, isolated miles from help? I bolted to my hallway closet, yanked out the small handgun I kept for emergencies, and crouched by the wall, trying to control my breathing as I waited, every creak of the house amplifying my fear. Then, a sudden, deafening bang. The man was slamming the butt of his rifle against the door, almost as if testing its strength. The wood groaned under the pressure, and a hairline crack appeared. Adrenaline took over. I fired a shot into the air, the noise ringing sharply through the house. Silence followed, broken only by the rain. After a few agonizing moments, I dared a glance through the peephole. The porch was empty. Hours later, when the police finally arrived, they found no trace of the man. They combed the area and discovered the remnants of the campfire, but that wasn't all they found. Under a nearby tree, partially hidden by wet leaves, was a duffel bag, thick and heavy, well sealed to protect against the rain. Inside were items that made my stomach lurch. A roll of duct tape, a large hunting knife, several zip ties, rope, and a black tarp folded neatly on top. One of the officers muttered that it looked like a burglary or worse kit, planted deliberately, maybe for days or even weeks, ready for use. I stared at the bag, my mind racing with possibilities. Had he been watching me, planning something unspeakable, maybe waiting for just the right moment to strike? The thought turned my blood to ice. After the police left, the silence in the house felt oppressive, almost suffocating. I walked around, checking every door, every window, looking for any sign that he might still be nearby. As I neared the back door, I noticed something chilling. A muddy handprint smeared across the glass as if he'd pressed his palm there, watching, waiting. The sight made me feel sick, and I backed away, every nerve on edge. Over the next few days, I installed motion-activated floodlights around the perimeter of the house. Each night, I lay in bed, the slightest sound setting my heart racing, every flicker of light outside making me jump. Sometimes in the dead of night, I'd catch a glimpse of shadows moving just outside the window, but whenever I checked, nothing was there. I felt hunted, as if he was still out there, biding his time. To this day, I still live in that house, though the memories haunt me. Cody's open spaces offer solitude, but they can feel less like freedom and more like isolation. And on stormy nights, when the rain drums on the roof and the mist closes in, I sometimes feel the hairs on the back of my neck prick up, a reminder that the shadow of that night still lingers, waiting, perhaps just out of sight.